talk about level 2 BIM, or rather building information modelling in the construction sector. We tend to talk about it's for clients and architects and contractors to build buildings much more efficiently and cost effectively. What do you see as being the main relationships at a city level?
It's a good question. I think one of the things is we try at the start of every project to actually try and, with each of our clients, actually try and work out, what is the purpose of their data. And one of the things we've been doing, especially with the government, has been through a 10-point test. And one of the things we test is, making sure that the data is valuable in terms of what they're buying. They're buying it once, it's got value. And making sure that, it's going to have, in terms of things like security, the supply chain can do it. And as part of that value test, so we've been really trying to work with them in terms of actually teasing out that, purpose of their data and how it fits in with that wider program. And I think we're finding they're all kind of bound by the same things. It's actually how to get my asset to perform better in the long run. And I'm sure that same agenda is the same with cities. We're moving more and more to the early stages, I think, of being outcome driven in terms, and I think that's a big step change for industry that has largely been, I think it's fair to say, capital expenditure driven. I would say if one thing we've had a success in terms of level 2 BIM is the fact that we've managed to join up both the capital and, if you like, operational expenditure. And the fact that we are now thinking more about the operational side of things, and we're having that conversation right at the back. So I think we tended to think very much start at the beginning with, let's be honest, I mean, in terms of construction projects, you look outside, the people that buy our assets and, are probably don't buy very often. They rely often upon project managers to translate what they want into a series of, if you like, deliverables. Including data, and try and make sure they get the value of that is big. But we're moving very much more definitely to outcomes and operational and asset intelligence. And I think that's where it starts to tie into the, if you like, the whole smart city agenda. And again, the big bit, when you went back to the original level 2 schema, it was always meant to be upscaled. The whole, if you like, one of the key members of it was ordnance survey. How do we start to think about making sure that we think of this in a real world context as well? And I think we'll see much more of, if you like, this blending of data sets. But for me, it's very much starting to think about when we get to that outcome level.
Perfect. And there's a question at the back. Swarm of panelists, this is probably going to be a tricky question.
So I'm going to follow up one question, but most of that's running through GIS, because GIS is a multi-layered platform that can carry data in all sorts of forms that's then tied to shape files. And so it's the one single platform that all jurisdictions throughout the world are using. What we typically think of as BIM for buildings is really Revit or the Bentley systems, and that then gets tied in through this connection. And we're dealing with that, but the idea of BIM as a three-dimensional modeling tool can't work at the city level because we don't have the computing capacity to do it right now.
Can I just say as well, one of the things we're trying to bust the myth of BIM is 3D as well, and I think that's one of the common issues we have. We just think we see it as being good quality, verified geometry, and we want to get that away from people thinking it as a technology piece. It's one of our main things.
Question there.
Thank you. I thought it was a really good session of presentations, and I've got a question for all the speakers around the subject of the social dimension of data. A quick first question, how long before we get to level 4 BIM?
Okay, I'm guessing that was one is probably aimed at me. Okay, it's interesting. In fact,
is it 5 years? Is it 2 years? And then I'll ask the rest of my question.
Oh, okay, can I say? I'll probably unpack it first. I think it's easier if we think it's taken us 5 years to actually build the standards around about level 2. Yep, and I think it will take us around about 7 years to move into level 3. And then we can start to think about level 4. Actually, I think one of the things we can do, and this is my own personal belief, is I think we can couple level 4 onto level 2 BIM. So I don't think level 4 has got to pass right through level. So I think the early stages of level 4 can be achieved just now.
I think that's a really encouraging answer, because the nature of my question is, can we afford to wait to incorporate the most important aspect of construction into the construction process, which for me, and I think for many of us, will be this social dimension, because in it are so many risks about social failure, economic failure. We've heard about the aspect of health, which has both social and economic consequences. So I guess my question to all the panelists is, can we What are the risks of not handling the social dimension in this conversation today?
Well, I think the risks are that we'll carry on building places that are bad for the environment and bad for the people, and we will see the capacity for our healthcare infrastructure carry on in the direction that it is now, which is it can't cope with the requirements that society is feeding to it. So I think we absolutely need to make a change now and recognize that we know that 3 to 4% of healthcare, health service budgets go to prevention, and the rest goes to curing people who are already sick. And we can't carry on expecting the health service to do it on their own. So us as built environment professionals across all of the different areas that we cover, architecture, design, planning, et cetera, engineering, need to take this on it and own it a bit more, I think.
So we're already, the thing that's crazy about this is we already use data to drive all of this. It's just a matter of where we're getting that data. So everybody that's creating and I use the legal framework because it's the thing that drives most of our cities, that data is already being used by planning professionals. We're talking about a change in understanding the data and the methodology to do the research to understand the outcomes and implications, which is just the incorporation of a standard research protocol. It's very, very simple. So it's not really about waiting for level 3 or level 4 BIM. It's about constant refinement and reevaluation. We're never going to get to some sort of point where everybody's happy and wealthy and healthy, right? We're just always making things better. So it's not about getting to that next threshold of technology. It's about using what we have. We have so much data right now, it is inconceivable that we are just not using. And so I think for me, that's the intellectual threshold that we have to get over to do this. We're drowning in data right now. So just think about adding all this extra data in. It's going to be unfathomable for us, right?
I think it's one of the greatest challenges we face. We think about how we design, we create and care for assets. It's very much the case that we'd never get in to speak to the people that are going to be actually running it at FM level, never mind the operational piece. So I think it needs a huge behavioural mindset from the client that actually to letting people think about it as a whole project team and actually speaking to the end users and getting access to that data. I think the other big thing as well in terms of construction is we're not very future-wise. It takes us so long to go through a procurement process. We're thinking about solutions for now rather than actually for 5, 6 years in terms of something that's getting there. We need to think more and more about getting access to that end user, and it's still very much a challenge, I think, for the construction industry. Just the way things are very much siloed off. Thou shalt never speak to the person that's one step to the right of you.
I don't come from the construction industry, but every conversation I have, whether it is in transport or whether it's financial services, I kind of tend to hear the same thing. Everything is so siloed. We are drowning in data. There is data, but where do I find it and how do I start using it? So it's I think we come back to that again and again. Like I said, I think there is that end-to-end thinking that's required. Who is going to actually benefit from that data at the end of it, or the result at the end of it? What exactly the analysis that needs to be done? Who are the parties that need to actually put the data together? And why is it that, what is the cultural change that is required for those organizations to start sharing that data? Because the problem is not technology. The problem here is actually culture. So what is it that's going to enable breaking of that, and whether or not we need to start thinking the way we design some of our infrastructure or some of our ways of doing things better. It's almost like the conversations I had just 2 days ago with Ministry of Justice, where all they did was, in terms of digitizing, moving everything into the paper forms onto the computers. That's basically all they did. But today, when they want to break that data into something usable, something that's digestible, they can't. They find it very difficult. It's going to be way too expensive. And I think that's the same problems we are facing here. So it's about that kind of culture change. It's not about, we can drown in data. It's the same as drowning in paper, but that doesn't really help us digest that in the right kind of format.
Our colleague from Innovate UK earlier today encouraged us to use language that was straightforward enough to be understood by a minister. And it seems to me that that's slightly underplaying the intellectual capacity of the average minister, but maybe a slightly different articulation of that is to say, what is the scenario that unfolds if no change is made? Because all the presentations today have been about change. And painting that scenario and placing it alongside the scenario that follows when we all make the changes we'd like to might help sharpen the thinking around the urgency of any of the actions any of us might want to take.
I completely agree. And I mean, we live in a global economy where you are seeing countries like Indonesia, China actually going extremely quickly, even India, on the smart city agenda. Now, if we want to catch up, we want to take a lead in that, the change is going to happen because the market actually demands it, and because the organizations, companies, we all in the room need to keep up with what's going on. And if we want to be ahead of the game, the change will actually happen. I don't believe that it is just a matter of putting regulation around things or actually forcing people to certain kinds of standards. I think the market actually starts pushing you because you have to keep up.
I'm sorry, I just have to take a little bit of. I'm sorry, I know I just, but we're building cities in China and Indonesia and Australia and all over the world, and what's happened with the platforms that are used to plan and build these places are coming from. I am not making this up. Are coming from the 1960s in the UK and the United States, and to some extent Australia. There isn't a single city in the world that is a smart city that's using this data to drive the physical form of the city. Not one. Can anybody in this room tell me one city that's doing that? There is, yeah. No, absolutely not. In fact, I can show you examples where the development that's happening in this city right now is reverting back to the same ideology and platform that was created in the 1960s. It's unbelievable.
Some of them are trying. I take your point. Some of them are trying. And I think this is the opportunity, is to then place those case studies of good against the prevalence. So I absolutely agree with you. The prevalence of 20th century car-dominated, obesogenic mindsets.
Absolutely. That's it.
What and then choose, which would you rather have?
Which would I rather? I'd rather have skinny, healthy, in shape, healthy people walking around in environments that are walkable, that mean they don't have to use their car. I mean, that's what I would like to have. That's the most sustainable system for the future. I mean, it's no longer a lifestyle choice. That doesn't exist anymore, right? It is the future. Maybe I'm overstating this a bit, but it's the future of civilization in terms of the development and the utilization of natural resources in the limited space we have left. We have the capacity to do it right now, but we don't have the political will coupled with the reliance on research that's looking for specific outcomes, right? And that's the danger to me in this conversation that revolves around the acquisition and distribution of data in the absence of a kind of methodology for understanding the impact that it has on the built environment. If that makes sense. Might not make sense.
I was going to throw a question back at you actually, in terms of, I think it was an article in Economist a few weeks ago that the current generation are now making decisions to turn off data sharing. Yeah. They've got into this situation where they know that people can find out where they are, what they're doing, and so effectively your point about a massive amount of data, is that going to stop as people start to say, well, is it all intrusive? It picks up your point as well. So have we had this tidal away of data now that going to start to kind of just drop off, and is that going to cause us problems?
I am not a technologist, and I don't want to answer that question. I have no idea what's going to happen in the future with data. But what I do know is that people in 17th century Amsterdam went to cafes to interact. And in the 21st century, people go to Starbucks, even though they're carrying their laptop, to interact because it is embedded in the way we live in the world to have physical interaction. So everything else that we talk about is secondary if we're talking about the physical form of the city. and creating a framework where we can actually live our lives at some daily level, right? But I don't know, who knows, right? I mean, you know.
If we knew, we'd be...
Yeah, I would be an architect. I do something else that makes a lot more money.
Fantastic. So any last questions to throw in this direction? Or are you all wanting that glass of wine as a reward for the day? I think you are. So I'm going to thank the panelists again. I'm going to thank you for your contributions. I think you've had quite a stunning day today. From certainly my position, we have had an amazing amount of information thrown at us by some of the world's leading experts. I'm not sure about you, but my mind is swimming with information and ideas. Every single person you've heard from today has thrown something at us, which I think has hopefully given you something to take back to wherever you're from, whatever country you're from, whatever environment you're from, to really start to make a change. And I think some of the comments were about being brave. We have some of the technology. We've seen some of it demonstrated. You've heard from some of the people who actually are living this space at the moment, but it's down to us how we want to manage the future. It's down to us how we want to drive this agenda. So it's about being brave. It's about creating a bit of a revolution, I think, as one of our speakers said today, if we really want to capitalise on connected cities and really making better decisions for all of us. So thank you, and I think waiting outside is some alcohol, which is always a good way to end the day. So thanks again.